This is your refresher video on the quadratic formula in order for you to be successful in completing your practice with the quadratic formula worksheet. So the quadratic formula is x equals, or whatever variable. So we're going to do number 2, so that one would be a k equals, because there's k's instead of x's. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Now to get a, b, and c, you want to figure out a is going to be whatever number is in front of your x squared term. So for number 2, our a value is going to be 5. B is the value that's in front of the regular x term. So usually the term in the middle of third order. It's going to be a -6 for this number 2. And then c is going to be the number that doesn't have any letter with it at all. So for this one, it's going to be -104. So we're going to go through and plug this in. Again, this is going to be k equals instead of x equals. So I have a negative b. Well, my b is already negative, so whenever I make a negative, it's actually going to turn into a positive. Then I have my plus or minus sign, so one of my answers is going to use the plus and the other one is going to use the minus. Then I have the square root of my b term squared. So notice how I put that -6 in parentheses whenever I square it. And then -4 times my a term times my c term. And that's all over 2 times my a term. And now we're going to go through and simplify. Now everything inside the square root, I'm actually going to do that all at once. I'm not going to type in the square root yet, but I am going to go through and do the -6 squared. Please put that in parentheses whenever you square it. And then do my multiplying and then subtract my 2 terms. So -6 squared minus 4 times 5 times -104 gives me 2116. And then that's all over 2 times 5, which is 10. Now, if you don't know if the number that you get inside the square root is a perfect square, because in the lesson where we looked at the perfect squares, we actually only looked up to 400, which the square root of 400 was 20, this 2116. Always type it in your calculator and see if it's a perfect square. If it's not a perfect square, you'll have to reduce the radical like we did in the beginning of 2-4. But if it is a perfect square, you can take the square root of it. And so with this one, 2116 actually is a perfect square. And the square root of it is 46. Notice how the radical sign is gone. There is no more radical sign because the square root of 2116 is 46. So now I have 6 plus or minus 46 all over 10. This gives me 2 different solutions. I have 6 plus 46 divided by 10 and 6 minus 46 divided by 10. And so I have to simplify both of those fractions. Well, 6 plus 46 is 52. Divided by 10 gives me a decimal, but if we turn that back into a fraction, that's going to be 26 over 5. So that's one of my solutions. 6 minus 46 is -40. Divided by 10 is -4. So that's my second solution. So all of these problems are going to give you 2 different solutions. This one happened to have 2 rational solutions because, again, I got that perfect square inside the square root. The other one we're actually going to work out is number 8. However, I do want to talk about number 6. You can see in number 6, I have a squared term and I have a number, but I don't have a regular term, like a k term in this case. If you were doing number 6, your b term would just be 0. It is possible for b and c to be 0 whenever you're doing the quadratic formula. However, a cannot be 0, because if a was 0, it's no longer a quadratic. So we're going to do number 8. So here's my quadratic formula again. If you have not already copied this down in your notes, I highly suggest that you do that so that you can have it to reference. So my A term for number 8 is 7. My B term is negative 11. My C term is 9. Now we have to plug in. So I start off with negative B. Again, B was a negative already, so that's going to be 11. So plus or minus the square root of my B term squared minus 4 times my A term times my C term divided by 2 times my A term. So now I have to simplify what's in the square root. Again, make sure you put that negative in parentheses, the negative 11, and the square goes outside. And this time I get negative 131, and that's all over 14. Well, 131 is not a perfect square. I do have that negative inside of the square root, so we do have to pull that out and turn it into an I. But other than that, 131, I believe, is prime. So it doesn't have any factors. There's no way that I can reduce this. But you do have to, anytime you have a negative inside that square root, you do have to pull that I out for the imaginary unit. And so that would be your solution. 11 plus or minus I squared root of 131 all over 14. This does still give us the two answers. One with the plus and one with the minus. The plus or minus is just a shortcut way to write this because I can't do any other simplifying besides pulling out the I. So I hope this was a good refresher to help you be successful using the quadratic formula. This will be coming up on an assessment soon, so you want to make sure that you are able to plug into the formula and simplify the way that you're supposed to. So go back, rewatch it, take notes if you need to, and reach out to me if you have any questions.